Hello and welcome to our Passion for Moms webinar series, Mothers Are Leaders. And if this is your first time joining us, welcome. We have just been having a great time interviewing different moms and hearing what their world and platform of sphere of leadership looks like, as we are all uniquely qualified, as God has given us so many different gifts, skills, and abilities. And today I have with me my friend Gretchen Brown. Gretchen is a registered dietitian, and she is going to talk to us today about health and nutrition, specifically in the area of gluten-free. And so if you have any questions as we dialogue through the webinar, then feel free to type in those questions, and we will try to save some time at the end of our time to answer any of your questions. But Gretchen, welcome. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, and just how nutrition has impacted your life?
Well, thanks, first of all, Shaman, for having me. It's always fun to chat with you, and I miss being able to sit across from a table with a cup of coffee and chat in Northern Virginia with you. But this is the second best, right? That we can do right now anyway.
It's so
yeah, so I'm Gretchen Brown, and as Shaman said, I'm a registered dietitian. I really have focused my career in culinary nutrition. So I basically went straight from the hospital internship into trading in my white coat for a apron, and have been working with recipes for 20 years now. I love cooking, I love food, and that was just a really great way to combine my love of nutrition and health, as those two, as we know, are so intertwined and so very important together. So I have been a recipe developer and a food photographer, a food stylist now for 20 years. Have a food blog and a cookbook we can talk about maybe a little bit more later, but I just love to eat and I love to share healthy food and gluten-free food with other people who love to eat too. So I've just been really grateful to find this little niche in my life.
why we get along so well. We both love food and love to eat.
I know. Those are the best kind of people, right?
Absolutely. Hey, why don't you tell us, so I know you said you're a recipe developer, but you also said food stylist. Maybe for those who are watching, what's a food stylist?
So a food stylist is basically the person who makes food pretty. If you ever watch commercials and you're like, that food is not, that hamburger does not look like the hamburger that you get when you go through the drive-through, right? So we're the people who work on the food and make it look really pretty. Basically, if you think of a clothes stylist or a hair stylist for a commercial or for some sort of editorial photography, we do that, but with food, and it's so very fun. I love it, and didn't even know that I was going to love that as much as I did. And so now I do it kind of for myself, as I have taken on the photographer role as well. But I started out in the test kitchens for Southern Living and Cooking Light magazine. So I used to do the food styling for the photography and work with their teams, their art teams there, for all the photos that you see in magazines and then the cookbooks and stuff. Got to work learning how to do all of the food styling there when I started out.
That is so fascinating. And like you said, that sounds so fun.
Super fun.
Now I have to ask you though, for somebody who's, kind of more type A, likes everything in order, super organized, I'm talking about myself, I tend to be a little bit, then particularly anal about, no, it has to face this way, or, I'm super picky, even if you're just cleaning like the garage or the basement. So when you start to plate your food every night, are you very particular about how every plate looks, or do you kind of, a little more relaxed at home?
I think there's like maybe a little bit of that like instinctive design that kind of just happens naturally. But I definitely am not like putting the, parsley on and like moving everything just so, especially when I'm handing it to my 4-year-old, because I know it's just not going to last.
Yes.
So, but definitely when I'm like trying, it's more of like an approach toward a piece of art or something when I'm doing my photography for it. But I think some of that just kind of comes out naturally a little bit when I'm plating food. at dinner too, to be honest.
I would think it would be hard not to, especially if you have an eye for that. Now, you mentioned your 4-year-old. You have 3 kids. What are the ages of your kids, and what does that look like in, because I know for moms it can be sometimes overwhelming. You hear a lot of moms complain about having picky eaters, or so what does that look like just in, we'll dive into the nitty gritty of that in a little bit, but just big picture, going into motherhood, how has maybe your skill and ability for nutrition helped you or challenged you as a mom?
Well, I do have 3 kids, like you mentioned. I have my oldest is my son, and he is almost 13. I have a middle child that's a daughter, and she's gonna be 8 next month, or actually 2 months, and then another daughter who will be 5 next month. So, you know, I think having just the experience of cooking, having been in the test kitchen and being familiar with food and different techniques of preparation and just knowing ingredients and having the nutrition background just kind of gave me the leg up, I guess, just because I wasn't intimidated by anything. I had the basic knowledge of what healthy foods were, which I think people do more and more now anyway, just because I think there's more education about it and more interest. But I just felt confident getting in there and just making what I thought that they needed to eat. And most of the time, at least with my first 2, they were pretty good about it. My third child, as third children sometimes do, has thrown me a little bit for a loop. She's the one who's much more opinionated. So I've had to kind of work with her a little bit, but also her being the third child, I'm like, she'll be good. It's okay. It's all right. If it's not, you know, if there can be a little bit, you know, more nights of chicken fingers than like really healthy, wonderful vegetables or something. So,
Right.
I think it's made me, my instinct is to put healthy foods in front of them, but I'm also not wanting to make it a fight with them because I think there's a balance there of introducing healthy things, but also not turning them against the whole idea of eating because they don't see, they have an unhealthy experience just in the psychology of it with the parents. So there's a balance for sure.
That's true. Now, when your kids were younger and maybe still with your 4-year-old, do you introduce the food? Because I think some of these are just practical, especially for our audience members that have young kids. They're just like, how do I do this? So do you just introduce the food and say what it is, and you know, whether it's like the 3 bites or, you know, whatever your introduction is? Or one of the things I did when my girls were little is I put vegetables in, specifically, I remember pancakes a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would make pancakes with, say, spinach or like broccoli, and they never, ever knew. I mean, eventually I told them and they thought it was hilarious. But, you know, I always tried to intermingle a lot of vegetables when they were younger into things that I knew that they would love and be really easy, and they had no idea that they were getting that extra serving of healthy nutrition. So how has your experience been, or maybe some ideas for the moms that are tuning in that are like, okay, just give me some starters or pointers on how to do this?
Yeah, I think a lot of people do that. I think that they're even, you know, some of those products that you can get at Costco with the muffin that it's a blueberry muffin, but has like zucchini and carrots in it, you know. So there are some of those ways to kind of sneak in some veggies. We also just introduce them to the actual food because I want them to know what it is. I want them to recognize it. I want them to try it. And I'm not super stern about it, but I also will say, you know, just try 1 bite of this. I need you to try it because maybe you do like it, you know? So if you try it, then you know how you feel about it. And so I think it's important to introduce them to the thing. So it's not just something they've never heard of, but maybe it's just in some things they didn't recognize it in. And so I think just as just an approach to introduce them to new foods, which I think is the key. And to have them try it because maybe they don't think they'll like it, but maybe they will. I do have the benefit of having my middle child loves, her favorite thing to eat is kale and salmon. She's 7. So, I mean,
She has a very sophisticated palate.
She does. And she will tell you her favorite thing to eat is kale and salmon. But so she has her little sister who's my, the one who's a little more difficult, and she looks up to her bigger sister. And so I think that like positive peer pressure among siblings can also be a big help. And if you can help that older child understand, like, let's talk about how delicious this is, and just that
Modeling.
bigger sibling, that modeling,
yes.
It can really work in your favor. And there are times that it does and there are times that it doesn't, but I think just sort of watching the family eat these things can just set a, like you said, and just modeling behavior it'll get there. It'll get there, and they will learn to like those foods too, more than likely. The other thing we do is, not that it's a substitute for healthy foods, but we do give our kids a multivitamin supplement. So just to feel like, okay, so today wasn't our best day, maybe today we had chicken fingers and French fries for dinner, because that happens, I mean, maybe there were a few baby carrots on the side, but at least we know that there's a multivitamin, before we go to bed, and we can feel a little bit better about some of that being taken care of.
Well, and I think also one of the things you mentioned reminded me of also trying, or whether you're eating out or at home, trying different items cooked different ways.
Oh, yes.
Let's pick on Brussels sprouts. They always get a bad rap, right? Just the name, people assume they're going to be bad. But, and I think I've made them maybe once or twice, but even when we've eaten out, we've ordered them, and my kids have loved them. And so I think also just being creative in, maybe you cook them one way and it wasn't a hit. You try a different recipe and they actually realize, oh, they're delicious. And so maybe even for some of the foods that you've introduced to your children, they may think they don't like because of them being cooked one particular way. And so just being creative with that variety of how you present it to your kids also.
Absolutely. And I feel like for my family, and I think for a lot of families, I will say the one fail-proof preparation method is roasting. So if you set your oven to 425 degrees and get a pan, put some olive oil over the whole pan. I put all sorts of vegetables, sweet potatoes, regular potatoes, Brussel sprouts, carrots, broccoli, everything. You can do cauliflower, all sorts of different vegetables, and throw them in your oven for maybe 30 minutes. You can flip them maybe halfway through so they kind of brown, but that process of roasting with the olive oil, it kind of pulls out the sugars, especially in the Brussels sprouts, but in a lot of the vegetables and the carrots. And it gives them a good coating of oil, and then some salt and pepper on top when you pull them out. And I think it's the combination of that natural sugar that comes out, the browning that happens, and then the salt and pepper. That's the way my kids love it. And sometimes I'll throw some chicken breasts on there or a pork tenderloin or something and bake it all together with one pan meal. And it's always a hit at my house. And my daughter, who is otherwise pretty picky about some vegetables, will eat roasted vegetables. So that's such a great idea. You've given me more inspiration and ideas, because I don't always think of that maybe with broccoli, but I don't think about it of just putting a lot of different, vegetables on the same pan. So and it's a great way to just like do a fridge clean out too, when you have like a bunch of vegetables that you kind of need to use up, just like pitch them all on the pan. I usually try to like keep them in segments. So my son doesn't like the Brussels sprouts. He's the only one. So then they're not mixed into together, and I can just give everybody, from the corners of the vegetable sections, what they kind of will eat from that. But it's a great one pan thing, and then you only have one thing to clean, and it's all done at once. And I love that.
Great idea. That's a great idea. Well, there's several things that I want us to dive into because you are a wealth of knowledge, and I want to try to be able to have as much dialogue for our audience as possible to pull out a few tips for us. But let's just start with the overarching theme of health and nutrition. As Christians, we believe like our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit. We should take care of our bodies. God's knit us together in our mother's womb, and so we should be intentional to take care of the body that He's given us.
Yeah.
Obviously, we know that that disease and health challenges, cancers, things like that are oftentimes very related to our diet. Maybe not always with everything, but there is a direct correlation oftentimes. So as a nutritionist, but also as a mom, can you just help maybe give us just a 2 or 3 minute summary about why it's important for us to, like everything in life, I love to be intentional in every area of life. And I think it's really important to be intentional in what we model, what we eat, and what we teach our children about taking care of the bodies that God has given us. So what, as a mom, would you say is kind of that overarching education or theme that we should take this seriously as mothers?
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, God certainly made our bodies to form and nurture children. And that's not just only when they were knit together in our wombs. I mean, this is something that is the gift and the responsibility that has been given to us. Each one of these kids that we have are gifts and responsibilities, and we have to do our very best for them. And I think we all have that desire in our heart to care for them and grow them, help them to be healthy and, you know, be members of society and that are benefiting each other and glorifying God. And I think one of the key ways that just instinctive, organic ways we do that is by feeding them and nurturing them from when they're, you know, on our breast or we're giving them bottles to when they're out of the house. And part of that is also a teaching process. I think not only modeling how we eat, but also modeling our feelings about our own bodies. Right. We want to put healthy food in front of them, but we also have to put healthy food in front of ourselves. We have to have positive messages that we give to them about our own bodies, because those little people are listening, and they're going to absorb a lot of that and figure out how they feel about their own bodies based upon how we're modeling how we feel about ours. And making healthy food a priority for ourselves shows them that it needs to be a priority for them too. Not only food, but also, you know, moving our bodies and exercising and just sort of having a healthy attitude toward our bodies and how we're supposed to care for ourselves and how we in turn care for them. Like you said, obviously, I think our bodies are made of what we feed it, you know, so if you can have a healthier plate in front of you, then that's gonna hopefully be able to nourish you and nourish your babies so that you can keep them from having some diseases and some things that can, you know, that we can otherwise fend off with good nutrition. I mean, certainly right now, there's just so much going on with concerns for health and, you know, with COVID being very real around all of us and affecting all of our lives. Not only wearing the mask, which I think is important, but also preparing our bodies and our children's bodies to be able to be healthy enough to have good, strong immune systems to be able to fight things like that. Maybe not just COVID, but, you know, just the common cold, or, you know, nourishing them with good nutrition, because it's from this food that we feed them that gives them the ability to fight off these things. So I think more now than ever, we can see, it feels more urgent to have strong immune systems, really. that we're building in our babies and in ourselves as the caregivers to these babies. You know, we want to be our best selves too. So
Right.
now it really feels like a priority.
Absolutely. And I think, so often people can feel overwhelmed or even judged, with, having busy schedules and, um, you know, drive-throughs become a quick excuse.
Yeah.
And again, without having judgment, because everybody does have busy schedules, and
Yep.
we all make those quick decisions that are easy in the moment. But I think that also planning ahead probably helps in some of that. If you're running from sports practices and games, and
Yes.
you have multiple kids and multiple things, then being able to maybe plan ahead and not rely on, oh, I don't have anything. Because the times that we've ended up going through fast food lines is if I haven't been thoughtful enough to plan ahead. And
Right.
and sometimes just there's long distances that you're not at home, and it's next to impossible. But what are some maybe tips that you found that are important, and how you can plan ahead so that you're not relying on those quick service meals, which typically are not the healthiest, when you're looking at being well balanced in fruits and vegetables and stuff?
Right. Well, I think there's a few different approaches, and I think it kind of depends on people's personalities. I think some people really like meal planning, and they really want to have on a Sunday their entire week planned. They want to go to the grocery store and get everything they're going to need for the week. And I totally support that. I think that's a great way to be prepared. That is like the ultimate preparedness.
That is not me.
It is not me either. But I value that person.
I'm too spontaneous. I don't know what I'm going to have on Thursday.
I agree. But I have some friends who do it and they love it and they swear by it. And sometimes they like Instagram their meals, and I'm like, you're doing really well with that. Your meal looks a lot better than mine does tonight. But I think there's also, if you don't want to be that prepared, then just having your fridge full of stuff that you can use so you can be spontaneous, getting some vegetables that your family likes, that you know how to prepare, that don't require a whole lot of like brain power, but you have them. Even if it's not like, I know on Thursday this is going to go in this dish, but if you have green beans and that that'll go over well with whatever protein you can make or whatever, then I think that is a great approach too. Just having your fridge stocked with good, healthy, whole foods, proteins, chicken, fish, beef, whatever it is that your family wants to eat, with some sort of a green or colored vegetable. And then I do some sparing carbohydrates, like maybe some potatoes or rice or something, just to kind of have it all rounded out. But having that stuff on hand, I think, is really key too. The other thing that I know a lot of people are doing is the mail ordered meals that you can get, like HelloFresh or some of those meal kits. I personally have not done one. Blue Apron, I think some of those others. Because I know some people just don't even know where to start to make something. So I think it's the intimidation factor of like, how do you even do that? How do you even make this? So what, I've heard some friends say is, it tells me step by step, like they send me the stuff I need. It tells me step by step what to do with it. And then I know I'm putting a meal in front of my kids and my family that I can be happy they're eating. So I think that there's so many options out there right now to really touch on the pain points that people have, whether it's, I don't want to think it all through, or I'm intimidated to even know how to use this. I had a friend say the other day, I made cauliflower. I'd never made cauliflower in my life because it came in my, my meal kit. And so I think that's great. It introduces people to new ways of new methods of cooking new ingredients, and then they feel confident doing it again another day. So that's another great option, I think.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific maybe samples or ideas that you would suggest to our audience that would be maybe something new or fresh that, say, we've all been spending a lot of time in our kitchen lately, with COVID, and so there's been maybe an exhaustion of, oh, now what do I do? Yeah. So maybe for those who are listening who are like, okay, do you have anything new or different that I could try that maybe, isn't in my repertoire of, weekly routine?
Yes, I have a few that I wanted to share. First of all, I do have a cookbook out that came out a couple of years ago. It's called Fast and Simple Gluten-Free, and we haven't even talked about the gluten-free thing yet, but Yes, I am exclusively gluten-free for health reasons for myself, but also because I want to share yummy gluten-free things with people who are required to eat gluten-free for their health. So I have Fast and Simple Gluten-Free that came out a few years ago. And I also have a food blog that's called Kumquat. So it's at kumquatblog.com, and I have hundreds of recipes. I've had the blog since 2011, so it's been a while, and I've collected a lot there. And obviously all of those recipes are just free for the use of whoever wants to get them.
That's amazing. So, say your website again one more time.
The name of my blog is Kumquat, and it is Kumquat blog, KUMQUAT blog.com.
Okay.
So that's where a bunch of recipes are for free. One of the ones I wanted to share from there, we'll start with dessert first, because that was, that's always fun, right? I have a grain-free, which means it doesn't have any wheat or corn or rice or any kind of grain. It's an almond flour based recipe, and it is a brownie, a skillet brownie that you make in like a cast iron skillet. And it's, it's super yummy and kind of gooey, and you can spoon it out and like put it in bowls if you're like social distancing, or if you're, all swapping germs like we do at my house, in our little interior community here. You can just spoon out of the skillet too. It's really fun. But there's a really yummy one on there that is a good grain-free option, which some people who have celiac disease or non-celiac gluten sensitivity, where you just can't eat gluten, sometimes grains can also be a little irritating altogether. So this is a great grain-free option. It's good high protein almond flour base. The other one, I do have my book here. This is what my book looks like. I have a recipe in here for some mango guacamole, which is really yummy as like a little appetizer for your family, or something to go on top of your tacos. I'm a good Texan like you. We have to eat our tacos, right?
Taco Tuesday tonight, baby.
It's tonight. Get your mango guacamole. So this is really basically a basic guacamole, but having that kind of sweet, fresh mango in it just kind of changes the flavor profile in a really, really yummy way. And there's some lovely champagne or Talfo mangoes. They're the smaller, yellower ones that are my favorite, and they're out right now. They're really sweet and really tender. So if you see those champagne mangoes, sometimes you can buy them by the case, and I do because my kids love them too. But those are any mango would work, but that's one that I would really recommend for this guacamole. Okay. And then I also have, because we need to round it out a little bit, there's a pecan crusted chicken tender.
Oh yeah.
In my book too. I guess maybe I'm like, my Texas is showing with the guacamole and the pecans here, because I love pecans in anything. And this adds a little bit of a nutty flavor to to these chicken tenders. And chicken tenders are always go over well, I think, with kids. They're easy, they're finger foody, and they taste good. And you can dip them in honey mustard or ketchup or whatever you want with these. So this is another really easy meal that's good protein, or just an easy something for the kids. And both of these recipes I will put on, because they are not on my blog, these are only in my cookbook.
Okay.
So I'll link to my I'll give you the link to my cookbook, but I'll also give you these recipes so you can share them with your audience, maybe on Facebook or wherever you want to share them.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, and then I'll also give you the link to that skillet brownie too, so that all of that can be kind of right there together for people to grab some really delicious recipes.
That sounds delicious. Yes, we'll be sure and add those to this webinar on the replay on
Good.
social media. Yeah, absolutely. So
And they're all tried and true with my kids. All three of these have been big hits with all three of my.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
They sound delicious. Well, you mentioned gluten-free, and I know that you have said that you're gluten-free for health reasons.
Right.
Personally, I also understand that gluten-free is probably just an overall healthier way maybe for us to eat. Explain to us a little bit about what that looks like, maybe even educate us on what gluten is. And for those of us who do not have any requirements in our family that cause us to have to eat gluten-free, are there recommendations that we should still lean that way? Or what do you have to say about, educate us about what gluten-free looks like and the benefits of it?
Okay. Well, gluten is a protein. It's a little protein that's found within the grain of like wheat, barley, rye, a few lesser known grains, triticale and couscous all have gluten in it. So it's just a tiny little protein that's found within this grain. A lot of people have a lot of trouble with this tiny little protein. The first group of people would be people with celiac disease, which is an autoimmune disease. And basically what happens when someone ingests that tiny little protein gluten, it causes an immune response where the body kind of sees it as a enemy. And so it puts out antibodies and it puts out like fighter cells to go kill it, but it ultimately is killing your own cells. And so it affects all sorts of different parts of people. I like to say it's kind of like finds the weakest link, whether that link is neurological, gastrointestinal, whether it's some sort of like skin issue. So most people think of issues with gluten being belly issues, but it can also be nervous system, it can be skin rashes, it can be migraines, it can be infertility, which was ultimately why I determined that I had celiac disease, was because of infertility and a lifelong battle with gut issues. So there's a broad spectrum of issues and symptoms that people can experience because of gluten. Another group of people is those that are called non-celiac gluten sensitive, which means they do not have the autoimmune disease of celiac disease, but they have some of the same response to gluten that people who have celiac have. Maybe not as much destruction to the body, but similar symptoms. So there's a few different tests that you can have done to determine which group you might fall in. And I think it's 1 in 100 people that they believe right now have celiac disease in our country. Yes. And then the whole non-celiac gluten sensitivity thing is a kind of a new term. I don't know exactly that they've determined how many people have that, because it's just, they're sort of figuring it out. But I think it's a lot too. I think it's maybe, I can't remember the numbers now. I used to know them, but I can't think of them right now. But really, I think these can be some of those people who are like, I tried Whole30 and I didn't eat gluten for 30 days. And then I started eating again and I realized, oh my gosh, my migraines came back, or they'd gone away and then they came back. Or I felt so much better, like I wasn't bloated anymore, but then I was bloated again once I started eating gluten again. So, I mean, I think it's always amazing to hear the stories of people who went off of it and then realized that they felt so much better. And it doesn't necessarily mean, unless you have celiac disease, there is like 0 gluten that you can have, because otherwise it really is like destroying your insides. But those who don't have celiac disease, sometimes it's a matter of balance for them, and sometimes it means they can't have any. So I think some of that needs to be discussed with a dietitian or with a gastroenterologist, just to kind of figure out what that needs to look like for people going forward. But I think it is just for almost everybody, I'm not going to say everybody, but for almost everybody, it can be a very inflammatory protein. So if you already have some inflammation going on in your body for one reason or another, it sort of is like gasoline on the fire for some people. And you don't figure out how much the fire can kind of dwindle until you take it out. So yeah.
So let me ask you a question, because maybe for those of us who are less educated in this department, I feel like that we've begun to hear a lot about gluten and gluten-free in our diets in the last, 15, 20 years, a lot more heavily, right? And it's become a lot more of a very common conversation, and restaurants have changed and adapted to having gluten-free menus. So when we look back, 50, 100 years ago, and we relied maybe a lot more farm to table, because, people ate a lot more what they grew in gardens and whatnot, then is it that gluten is something that is new in existence, or has it always been there? Why is there a drastic shift in the discussion? Or is it that we've started to notice all these health problems, and have finally discovered maybe the root cause of the health problems? So what does that look like as far as why it's become such a hot topic and a recognized conversation that did not exist in years past, say with our grandparents?
I think the answer is yes, all of that. I mean, we went to Baylor almost at the same time, right? And I remember in my nutrition classes, there was a paragraph that was this big about this crazy disease called celiac disease that these, very few people get or whatever. So, I mean, even since then, it's just exploded. I think there's a lot of things. They have hybridized wheat so that it has more gluten. So the wheat that we get in our grocery store sandwich bread is not the wheat that they used to eat, hundreds of years ago, or maybe even 100 years ago, because they've changed it. They've hybridized it so that it is higher in gluten, to be more shelf stable, to be kind of sturdier for making it in the field. So there's just more gluten in the wheat now. We also, I think, consume a lot more of it now because it's kind of in that convenient fast food stuff. It's the stuff you grab off the package off the shelf is usually some kind of a wheat-based something. So I think we're consuming more of it. I think our bodies are a little bit more inundated by different things in our environments, plastics, off-gassing of the plastic in our car when we get into it, whatever chemicals are around us all the time that we don't even think about, carpet, all the things that our bodies are kind of taking on that we don't even think about, that probably didn't exist with our grandparents or their grandparents, and then also just science and understanding what people are experiencing, and being able to diagnose those things and put names to those things. And I remember my mom telling me about my grandmother's father, and this is the side that we get all of our autoimmune diseases from. she said she remembered him just like, he always had this like bloated belly, and he was always like walking around like he had these achy joints, but it just was the way grandpa was, you know, but he probably had celiac disease and maybe even rheumatoid arthritis, you know. So I think there's also just the diagnosing and the treatment and the education and the internet. I mean, gosh, for people to be able to figure out their own situation and educate themselves to know what's going on with themselves. So I think it's all related, but I think that a lot has changed in our environment and in the food we eat these days. So yeah, I think it's probably just a combination of all of it. And I think that now we know, and we can know kind of what offending factors to remove and ways to kind of heal our bodies and nourish our bodies, so that if those symptoms do sound familiar, or if it is something you're experiencing, whether you've been diagnosed with something or you just know you feel better when you don't eat it, we're now empowered to be able to educate ourselves and make changes for ourselves and sort of take on our own healthcare. And, you know, gratefully, we've been able to change menus and change products on shelves so that people like me who have to eat gluten-free to be healthy, we have options, and it's amazing.
What about the person who may be listening who's like, well, I feel like I already eat healthy. I eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. I, you know, actually don't eat a lot of desserts and sweets. And, you know, our family does, you know, eat regularly pretty healthy. Are there particular things you mentioned like migraines or skin irritations? I'm not sure if you were talking about rashes or just maybe more blemishes or breaking out, or maybe achy joints, you know, knee pain or things like that. Are there specific things that you would say, you know what, if you have those, you should at least try it? Or would you say, you know, overall, in the broad scheme of things, eating healthy is, you know, fine if you're eating healthy? Or is there something, even with just even you're mentioning about the hybrid of how they're doing the wheats and the breads, I think about all the sandwiches we make for kids, you know, and that, or the summertime, you know, we're cooking out hot dogs and hamburgers all the time. So what would you say maybe some triggers that we should a light bulb should go off and say, oh, I hadn't thought that could actually be connected, you know? Are there some things that, besides the couple things that you mentioned, that would be kind of trigger points that we should maybe pay attention to if we start noticing that, or like, oh my gosh, that could actually be a solution to this last year, you know?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think first of all, keep it up if you're eating a lot of vegetables and good stuff, and, you know, helping your kids focus on that too. I can promise you, my family is all gluten-free too. And so going out, not that we're all going out very much anymore to restaurants, but it is not easy to find a kids menu that's not just like all gluten, you know, grilled cheese, hamburger,
Right.
chicken fingers, there you go, you know, hot dog maybe. And it's really hard to feed your kids gluten-free, even at restaurants. But I mean, I think some of those kind of persnickety symptoms that otherwise people are like, I don't know why you keep having migraines, or the rashes I was talking about, can be rosacea, can be acne. There's a specific rash that can occur in people who have celiac disease. It's called dermatitis herpetiformis. It's a specific celiac disease associated rash. And so, you know, hopefully you would be able to, your doctor would be able to recognize that in particular, but definitely just swelling. And I remember when I became gluten-free, like my skin cleared up, my face didn't feel swollen anymore. I look back at pictures of myself and I'm like, oh my gosh, look at that poor girl. She just looks swollen. But, and then of course, I know migraines can be a really common one. Mouth sores, ulcers in your mouth can be a common one as well. Any type of like bloating, constipation, diarrhea, either one. Joint pain can also be related. If you just have some sort of like, I don't know why my joints hurt, but they hurt every day, then that would like put up a little red flag for me. Sometimes it's just some of these like chronic things that nobody really knows why. Certainly infertility for me, and heavens, for all that us women go through to have babies and to get pregnant, to not eat gluten for a period of time, just to see if maybe that's your thing. It feels like the least of the requests of the things we put our bodies through. So, I mean, I think it's important to talk to your doctor. I think it's good to see a gastroenterologist or see a rheumatologist. If you feel like maybe that's the right direction to go in. There's some tests they can do now, genetic testing, and they can do blood testing and small intestine biopsy to determine if you have celiac disease. But even if they say they couldn't find anything, if you feel better when you don't eat gluten, then I say just don't eat it.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's good advice. That's good. What you mentioned a little while back when we were talking about the vegetables. I'm going to diverge into a new topic a little bit.
Yeah.
And kind of cleaning out the refrigerator of putting all the vegetables on the pan. One of our family favorites has become kind of a everyday staple in our house, are smoothies.
Uh-huh.
And I think about that also kind of a cleaning out to some degree, especially if you're doing like green smoothies with, you know, lettuce and spinach and things like that. Is that something that you've dived into with your kids, or is there, I'm guessing that would all be gluten-free, everything you would typically put in a smoothie, right? With fruits and vegetables. So do you have any recommendations or thoughts on smoothies, and especially summertime? And, you know, it just is a good, healthy way for us to get that nutrition.
Yeah. Yeah. All fruits and vegetables are gluten-free, other than grains like wheat or, like I said, barley, rye, which isn't normally something you'd kind of throw into your smoothie anyway. But anything that's a fruit or, you know, green vegetables, colored vegetables, those are all going to be gluten-free. My kids would love it if I made them a smoothie all the time. They love smoothies. I probably don't make them as many smoothies as I should, but yes, I think it's a really great way. Like we were talking about, kind of sneaking in vegetables. It's a great way to put them in there. And then you have some of those fruits that kind of mask, you know, sweeten it up and help it all go down. The only thing that I would recommend is maybe not going too heavy on the fruit, because that, you know, that can kind of just add a lot of, fruit sugar. And just, you know, the sugar in general, but at least it's the whole fruit typically. And you're getting some of those good fibers in there too. But maybe adding some of the vegetables, maybe a little bit of nut butter or sunflower butter or something to bump up the protein a little bit, or a scoop of your favorite vanilla protein powder or something is a nice way to kind of bump it up, so it makes it a little more whole, you know, kind of what would be on your plate. Have your protein and and your veggie and your fruit all right there. But yes, my kids love smoothies. I think adding things like kale or spinach just to get the green in there. And, you know, sometimes they're not afraid to drink something green, as opposed to maybe eat something green on their plate. It's kind of, I don't know why, but maybe because it looks like ice cream. But, you know, adding all sorts of different, some people like celery in their smoothies, or, you know, all sorts of different cucumber, all sorts of different vegetables that you can maybe add in. I think there's so many fun ideas out there that you can even just search on the internet to find some fun combinations. But it is a great way to just kind of throw a lot of good stuff in one place. I just want to caution against it being an entirely fruit smoothie, because I think you're kind of dipping over into dessert at that point.
Right. Yeah. If you're not adding the greens in there, and using the fruit as complementary versus
Right. Yep.
Yeah, my middle daughter has become quite the smoothie queen and loves making smoothies and has enjoyed a variety of recipes. And
what's her favorite one? Do you know?
I don't know. Well, I wouldn't know what it's called, but she's like researched and looked into a lot of different ones. And so she has some that she enjoys making.
Okay.
And typically we do peanut butter and banana, but she likes to add in different either fruits and, we've explored a lot of different. I tend to have a lot of lettuce and spinach in mine.
Yeah.
So yeah, but they're fun and they're easy and it's such a great way to continue to add those fruits and vegetables into your diet. And
Another vegetable.
it's so easy.
It is. It is. Another vegetable I love to use is beets in smoothies because it turns it pink, which is always a positive color for children, and you can kind of mask some of the flavor of the beet if you want, because beets are really high in nutrition. And you can even buy the ones that are already roasted in the packages in the refrigerator section of the produce area. Okay. So you don't want to use a raw beet because it's just too hard. It'd be like putting a raw carrot in. But if you buy the cooked beets that are in the refrigerator section of the produce area, you can throw in a whole beet and it turns it all pink, and throw in some maybe frozen cherries or berry mix or something. So it's all kind of pink in there, and it kind of masks some of the earthy flavor of the beet. And most of those are roasted beets that you get. And so it kind of sweetens them up anyway. So that's kind of another fun idea. In addition, just the green.
If you did buy them fresh, you would want to roast them and let them cool and then use them.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. You roast them, maybe peel them. But the nice thing, I think Love Beets is the common brand that you can find. They have different flavored ones too. They have like some with some vinegars or honey or something on them. But I would just, if you want to, unless you like that, you could throw that in your smoothie too. But if you just want like the basic unflavored beet, you can pick those up. I mean, I even bought some at Target and our Super Target the other day. So they're around. But those are a fun thing to add to a smoothie too, if you want to kind of pump up the nutrition a little bit.
I will have to try that. I have never bought beets. I'm not a beet fan, but I would totally put it in a smoothie. So I will try that.
Once again, just, you can just throw so many other flavors on top of it that you get all the nutrition from it, but not that like I love beets actually. I like that earthy beet flavor. But if you don't, then this is a great way to eat some beets. And they're actually they're pretty high in sugar just naturally. Whether you realize it or not, they kind of add a sweetness. And then add some frozen cherries or something on top of it, and some other berries or something if you want them. And it makes it nice and sweet.
That sounds delicious.
Yeah.
You can never go wrong with pink. We have a lot of pink in our house.
I'm sure you do.
The drinking pink drinks is right up our alley.
That's right.
We like our pink. Well, Gretchen, our time is almost up. So as we begin to wrap up, as I said, man, you are a wealth of knowledge. I love being able to have conversations with you. You always inspire me and challenge me to think creatively and to be wise in decisions in feeding my own children. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
As we begin to just wrap up, do you have any final words of wisdom just as we are continuing to cook for our families and how to not get bored or overwhelmed? What would that look like if you were to just have a word of inspiration of hang in there, of, or something maybe to try differently? I always say that I don't really enjoy cooking, so I've tried to psych myself out with, fun music and a glass of wine while I cook, thinking that it's magically going to make cooking fun. Do you have anything like that would be inspiration that we can try to continue on our healthy journey?
Yeah, well, I think, gosh, these are such different times we're living in right now, right? I mean, I feel like it's very intense. Uh-oh. I just lost you. Hold on real quick.
You're still there.
Can you see me? Okay, I'm so sorry. I don't know what just happened.
It's good. You're good.
Okay, good, good. No, I was going to say, I just feel like we're in such an intense family time. I mean, it's just constant with these little people around us all the time that want to eat all the time. And it's wonderful to have this time with them. And I think it's a blessing to just slow down a little bit, to not feel like we have so much on our plate. It's a gift to be able to spend this time with our kids, and just to kind of remind ourselves of that, like take a deep breath, but also to be gracious to ourselves, because it is a lot of pressure. It's a lot of time to be with our children and feed our children and educate our children, and help them with their emotional state of everything that's going on. And so I think if we can look at it as an investment in our kids, but also just be gracious to ourselves, that if it's not always perfect, that's okay too.
Right.
The best thing we can do is to be in a healthy mental place for ourselves, so that we can be in a healthy mental place for our kids. And nutrition is certainly a part of a healthy place for ourselves, but just taking advantage of the opportunity to kind of slow down a little bit, but also be okay if it's not perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
Just broadly speaking, big picture, what is one thing that you want your kids to know when they leave home at their core? So whether it's something nutrition related or anything, if you're really wanting to instill one thing in your kids, give us a taste of what that would be, that you want your kids to leave home knowing at their inner core.
At their inner core, I want them to know that they're loved. Really. I want them to know that they are valuable and they are loved, that they are worthy, that I love them, that there's nothing they can do that would make me not love them. And there's nothing that they could do that would make God not love them, that he created them with a purpose and he loves them deeply. Because I think that instills a love for themselves, an acceptance of themselves, and a worthiness of themselves, not only just for their mental health, but also because then you want to feel like you need to invest in who you are, and investing in who you are partly is nutrition, and taking care of yourself, because you're worthy, you're loved, that you need to love this too. This body that you've been given, and this life that you've been given. And I just feel like love and acceptance and worthiness just saves so many people who might otherwise really struggle with life. And so, yeah, that I try to just love my kids more than anything, whether they eat their peas or not, like, you are worthy of my love. Right. Anytime, no matter what. And that's really, truly, I feel like the best gift that I can give to them.
That's so good. That's so good. Well, I know you love those kiddos and you're doing a great job. And I love seeing how God's giving you a gift and wisdom in nutrition and the food styling and all the artistic and the knowledge about health and food. But I love that even as a mom, being able to incorporate that in your home as well as the platform around you. And I think that really sums up what these webinars are all about, is encouraging all of us as mothers, recognizing that we do have a platform for leadership in our homes and in the unique gifts and abilities that he's equipped us with. For you, it's nutrition. Mm-hmm. And so just being able to use the platform that he's given us for his glory, and you do that so well. So you're an incredible leader. You're an incredible leader as a wife and as a mother, but also with educating us in how we can be better stewards of our bodies. So I appreciate your time, Gretchen, and any final words that you would have for our audience as we wrap up our time together.
Well, you're so kind, and thank you for those sweet words. I think nutrition's an interesting thing because we all eat, and we all, experience this experience of eating. It's not just something that is just my field, you know, it's maybe something that I can shepherd people through, but we all do it. And so I think that if we can teach our children how to do it well, just like teaching our kids how to clean a toilet and how to drive a car, and, you know, all the things we have to do to help them be adults, that this is such a big building block for them, because it's something they'll do for themselves and it's something they'll do for their children. So it's truly a gift of, you know, a skill and a requirement in their lives. And so I think this is a big, important one and something everybody does every day. So I think it's just an easy, intuitive teaching option and opportunity for us to take on for our kids. And it's just such a nurturing, loving thing we do too. You know, that's one thing I love about food, is that it really brings people together. And, you know, breaking bread with someone, your relationship is never the same. I mean, it's bigger and broader now that you've shared a meal together. There's something almost poetic and lovely and, you know, holy in sharing food with somebody. And I love that God made it that way. You know, I mean, it tastes delicious. It builds friendships. It brings people together. And I think if we can sort of embrace eating and food as something not only like this, like you have to go be on the treadmill, but as something that's like this loving experience that you can have with the people that you love around you, or the people you want to be your friend. I think that if we can, as moms, like take it on as this like nurturing, loving experience we can have with the people that God put in our lives and gave us the responsibility to help grow and to teach, that I think maybe that too can help change our view when we're having to feed them 3 meals a day. And so I love that part of food, and I hope that maybe just that thought can kind of invigorate the moms that are listening to think of it as just a lovely, holy experience that we get to have with these little people in our lives.
That's amazing. And actually that inspires me in so many ways. So thank you for that. It also made me think that during these quarantine seasons, and we haven't been super consistent, I need to get back on our regular schedule, but I had each one of my girls once a week FaceTime with my mom to have a grandmother, granddaughter.
Oh, I love that.
Session. And
I love that.
You know, she's an incredible cook. And so being able to pass on and develop that, you know, generational passing down recipes and cooking together, and just something that they'll always cherish forever. So that's been special for them to be able to have that FaceTime, you know, weekly cooking lesson with their grandmother. And so that's been really fun and enjoyable. But again, when you were talking about the holiness of eating together, but the bonding of cooking together, that has been a really creative and fun bonding experience than I know for my mom and for my girls.
Oh, I love that idea. I'm sure they're going to remember that forever. I mean, just to be able, and that's one of the beauties of COVID, right? Is that we're having to be creative about the things we're doing, and you might not have otherwise done that, but I love that you've been able to give them that gift in the middle of all of this. Because I mean, undoubtedly they will remember those experiences and those recipes for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Anyway, well, Gretchen, it is so good to have this conversation. You are an inspiration. And so thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom and education. And to our audience members, thank you for joining us. And we will be back every Tuesday, 2 p.m. Eastern. Thank you again and have a blessed day.